Dean are supposed to join us and they're not here yet. Shall we start, Chief, or do you want to wait a little bit longer?
It's up to you guys. If you want to get started, I'm fine with that. And we can catch them up on what they missed, or we can give them a few more minutes. I'm okay either way.
Okay, why don't we get started? Because I have a few things I want to talk about. So we'll get started and take a roll call. I'm here. Tom, you're here.
Yes.
Okay. Dave, you're here. And
Yeah.
Stan, you're here. And Chief White's here. So we have 5 people and we do have a quorum. So I'm going to start the meeting at 4:07. And I'm going to take minutes today, if you don't mind. I'm going to keep them brief, but I'll do that unless anybody has a problem with that.
Thank you.
Okay, so I'm happy to do it.
Hey, settle over the room.
Very good. Quiet, peace and quiet. We have a virtual meeting. So Chief, are there any members of the community that are with us today?
I looked and I see no additional attendees.
Okay. Used to be a hot ticket.
Uh,
Bada boom.
Oh, well, okay. So this is open time and we don't have anybody, so that's fine. Tom, thank you for the minutes. Hi, Nadine. We just started and we haven't done any business. Thank you for joining us. And you're here.
Yeah, sorry for being tardy.
It's okay. We started a little late.
Okay, great.
Tom, thank you for the minutes. Were there any additions or corrections to the minutes? I thought they were quite thorough. Does anybody have any suggestions of changes or adjustments or anything?
They look great.
I
Okay,
move to adopt.
okay, so moved.
Second.
Second, Dave, thank you. All in favor, say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Okay, they're approved. Thank you, Tom. Beautiful. A brief report from the Fire Foundation. The Treasury hasn't changed very much. It's about $65,000. So that's good. And I want to remind people that the tentative date for the crab feed is December 11th, 2021. I say it's tentative for obvious reasons. We will make a yes or no on that by Labor Day. And if COVID is just background noise and not a problem, and we can have it at the Recreation Center, that would be great. Of course, issues around climate change, wildfires, demolic acid in the crabs, and all the other little things that can be annoying and problematic will be part of the equation. But I think the main thing will be COVID or not. And if it's a go by September, Labor Day, then it's a go. The work really starts in July as far as finding auction items and things, but I'm looking forward to hopefully having it in December, and we'll keep our fingers crossed. The one other thing that I want to talk about from the Fire Foundation is Chief White brought to us a possible proposal for screening cancer in the firefighters. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to go over this. I'd like to use the commission reports to talk about it rather than now, because it's going to take a few minutes to discuss it. But it's a very novel cancer detection program in firefighters using dogs. So I don't know if people have heard of that, using dogs to ferret out cancer, but it's a very interesting topic, and I've done a bit deeper dive into it. So I'll report that under commission reports. I won't do it now, but that was the main thing on the Fire Foundation. Any questions on the Fire Foundation at this point? Anybody have any concerns, questions, or anything? Okay. As far as the Historic Subcommittee, you may have seen in the minutes from the fire department that I did donate 2 fire buckets to Chief White for the historical presentation. Those are actually very interesting buckets. They were probably used in the 1870s, maybe 1880s in San Rafael. The fire department was founded in 1874, but those buckets are right about that time, 1870s, 1880s. And they were loaned to the Clinton volunteer muster over in Oakland in the 1950s. And somehow they stayed over there and never came back to San Rafael, and eventually got to a collection of a guy I know who collects fire stuff in Berkeley, and he put them on eBay and I bought them, and now they're back home. So the buckets, which originally started in San Rafael, are now back in the chief's office and will be part of the historical display when we find the right way of displaying it in the lobby. What was interesting was one of the buckets is marked. Both of them aren't. They're made out of leather. They're very old. But the one that's marked says SRFD. I think you can see that in the picture that when the chief's holding the bucket. And I was a little concerned that maybe this wasn't San Rafael. Chief's going to get it, which is great. So, I mean, it could be anything. SRFD could be Santa Rosa, you know, whatever. So you can see that SRFD,
Right.
just the letters. Well, it turns out I gave Bob Marcucci a call, the former chief, and Bob said, you know what? I have that exact same bucket. It says SRFD. An old timer gave it to me a long time ago. Unfortunately, it's made out of leather, and someone put something on his bucket and it squeezed it down. It got
Oh,
sort of
no.
damaged. So he had to put these rods in it to get it back up again. It still got the squeeze marks from something been on top of it. So his is damaged. These buckets are in really good shape, and they are San Rafael, and I think they're a nice little piece of history to stay in the department. So that's one of the earlier donations, and we'll be looking for more stuff. I think when we talk to people who are retired from the department, if they have things and they want to donate them, we can look into that. I've given the chief a copy of the Marin History Museum's donation form, which says, I donate this for unconditional use. I sign it over. If you choose to deacquisition at some point, you can either give it back to me or you can, you know, have my permission to sell it, et cetera. So we can use that form for donations. And the last thing I want to say about the historic subcommittee is that I did donate one of these masks to the Marin History Museum because they were calling for memorabilia from COVID. And I said, well, you know, I have an extra mask with a fire logo on it. So I donated that. They said, well, we'll think about it. And then they just accepted it last week in their permanent collection. So that'll be part of the History Museum's history of COVID in their stuff, not in ours, but in theirs. So, okay. So that's it for me. Any other questions on the historical subcommittee or anything along those lines?
I have a question about the History Museum. Am I
Yes.
correct in reading they are moving back to the Boyd Park Gatehouse?
I did not hear that.
Anybody else see
Has
that?
anybody
article?
heard that?
It's
Yeah.
in the in the
Ms.
IJ.
Tucci?
Yeah, I can't confirm it. I just know that's something that I read recently as well.
Ah, okay.
Very interesting.
That we might be able to, once they, assuming they do that.
Yeah.
And once ours is up and running in the lobby, we might be able to do a little cross promotion to see more up the block.
Absolutely.
Or
They have
up
been
there,
very-
say, see more down at the lobby.
Yeah, they've been helpful. They have a lot of photographs, old photographs, even from early part of the 20th century of the fire department and fires and different things. So we use those, and we're going to put some stuff in the lobby on the walls and things, which was decided against at the end of the day. But they have a lot of photos, a lot of memorabilia, and that would be a good cross-pollination.
Yeah, okay. Just curious.
I agree. So let's go to fire commission reports. I'm going to go last. Let me go first to Tom. Anything you'd like to report, Tom?
No, I have questions, but I don't know when to bring those up.
Okay, is it for the chief or is it for the commissioners or?
Well, it's more generic. I'll just bring it up now. I thought Stan and Dave were going to be the new commissioners, and then I saw that the city council interviewed some people. So I'm confused at what happened. And I don't know if chief knows or maybe nobody knows.
Okay, Tom, I'm with you. I thought we were going to elevate one of the alternates. That was what happened to me back in the mid 90s. But Chief, what was the thinking of reaching out to new people and such? Do you want to talk about that in your report or do it now or?
The best I can say is I'm assuming that the mayor wanted to put it out for interview and see what was in the community. I didn't really have a direct conversation to find out what the line of thinking was on that. So I think it was explained by Commissioner Hill, though, that even the alternates aren't really considered to be alternates. They're more like part of the commission. There's not a real delineation made between commissioners and alternate commissioners. So that being said, I think we're looking at everybody almost on the same plane, even though there's a asterisk or a quotation marks with alternate next to it.
Okay. Okay, here's what I think. I agree with you. I think in my mind, there's no differentiation between member and alternate. You're treated the same and you have all the perks and benefits, whatever they are, of being on the fire commission. Now, I will say that I would like to make an executive decision, and if the chief supports it, we can make that recommendation to the city council. But as you know, we're limited to 2 terms as members of the fire commission. So this is my final term, and I'll be terming out next March. But I would like to think that if you've been an alternate, that doesn't count towards your 2-term limit. So the
Yeah,
advantage,
I don't think it does, Steve, because I'm in my second term as well. And I think I did 2 terms as an alternate. So I'm
Okay.
really like, I think 4 terms now. So I agree with you. I don't think alternate is considered a
so
term.
that would be the silver lining. If anybody's feeling any slight because they're an alternate or not a member, I would say the advantage of being an alternate is that the clock is not ticking on your 2-term limit.
Hmm.
So that would be an advantage. So Stan and Dave, you're the 2 alternates. Your clock is not ticking. You have, once you apply for full membership and you're appointed, you'd have 2 terms after that point. So that would be a huge advantage. And I think for the future, that would be a good thing for the fire commission. So if
Okay.
the chief is okay with that, I'm going to make that a rule, and we'll call it the Mizrock rule, but we'll have to have it codified by the mayor. That Nadine, do you have any thoughts on that?
Well, you can reapply after your second term though, correct?
I think you can have 2 terms. Well, you can have 2 terms and probably you'd have to go away for 4 years and come back, or 2 years or 1 year. I think 2 consecutive terms is what they put a limit on. That's my understanding.
Okay.
And that was about 4 years ago,
Hmm.
4 or 5 years ago. Anyway, I'd like to put that as a bright spot, and I'd like to make that an idea that comes to fruition. If the chief is with it, I support it. And it would be your call, chief.
I'm
Okay.
absolutely in favor.
The chief likes it. Beautiful. So alternates don't have their clock ticking. You're in suspended animation on your clock. Everything else. Thank you, Marcel Marceau, for demonstrating that. That's great. Okay, so anyway, Tom, thank you. Good point, and maybe the chief will give us an update on what the city council decided Monday night about which person. So Nadine, anything you'd like to add to the commissioner's report today?
Just that I was watching the fire that happened a few days ago, and if Commissioner Larry was here, I would remind him that he talked to us about this and brought aerials a few years ago, several years ago in 2018, I think. And it looks like we need some more cleanup out there. But once again, my hat's off to the women and men of the fire department, because they did a great job watching the fire, attending the fire, and putting it out. And I'm really excited about getting into more of the social media. I saw on Nextdoor, people were asking questions and what's going on. And here I've got it, it showed up on my Pulse instantly, or, pretty quickly. So just really trying to get people to get that kind of information pushed out to them, instead of them feeling like they have to go asking about what's happening. So I really like that Pulse app.
So Nadine, you knew about the fire right at the time it was going on?
Yeah, because it came on as a notification on that Pulse app that Chief Gray a long time ago told us about, Pulse Point.
Oh, Pulse Point,
And
yes.
so Pulse Point tells me, when a tree's down, when there's a medical emergency, when there's a fire alarm. And of course, you can have it only tell you certain things, but I like to know it all. And so it did tell me when that fire started, and
Okay,
it shows
great.
you where it is.
I didn't think to go to Pulse Point. I didn't hear any sirens, but I smelled the smoke. And that it's smart to go to Pulse Point and figure it out. Excellent.
Yeah.
It was good to see that the news media coverage was pulling from the Twitter posts coming from the fire department, and was a really important part of the way that they covered the story.
Mhm.
Uh-huh. Excellent. Okay, thank you, Nadine. Dave, anything you'd like to add today to the reports?
I just had one thing, so I just put it up in the chat. Hopefully you can see that, but there was an article back in March that was in the IJ that caught my eye. Did you all see that? Did it pop up in the chat where you can see the link?
Yes, it did.
Great.
Tell us about that, Dave.
The takeaway from this, it was interesting. So it's a Google study that was based on evacuation and some of the challenges of evacuation in Paradise. And so what they wanted to do is look at other communities that could have a similar type of bottleneck in the evacuation, and they picked Mill Valley. And obviously, Mill Valley does have a very constrained passage to get in and out of. And it caught my eye because I know that there's some areas in San Rafael that might fit that same profile. Certainly along the, one area that I drive every day because I live out that way is Point San Pedro, and that corridor of Glenwood and Peacock and Loch Lomond, all the communities there. So I was wondering if we could ever reach out to Google to see if they could do a similar type of study on our behalf, because I think what it's intended to do is just simulate a model of the evacuation traffic patterns and then raise awareness for how to create mitigation strategies should there be bottlenecks.
Chief, is that part of what Quinn is doing with the wildfire mapping and such, evacuation routes?
Well, we have a group called Zone Haven. Zone Haven's actually been working with MWPA and multiple individuals and agencies within the county. In fact, they started back just about 8 weeks or so ago, and they're supposed to have a deliverable sometime at the end of this month for us. And they're taking all the information combined from a variety of sources, a variety of maps, the wildfire prevention plans, local historical resident knowledge, individual first responder knowledge, any source of information they can compile to actually overlay and basically make determinations about how we could accomplish evacuations throughout Marin County. So this is a huge undertaking, but they're well positioned to do it. They've been doing this in multiple counties throughout the region. They're finishing up right now, Alameda County. They've been doing work for San Mateo County, and they've actually ran drills, evacuation drills there successfully. Marin County is actually one of the last counties to join. I introduced Zone Haven's chief operating officer to the Marin County Fire Chiefs Association. That's how they were starting to get inroads into Marin County and bringing that same tool here. So each individual district or community here in Marin wouldn't be operating on some separate platform. We want to actually ensure that everybody's got the same information and working from the same premise countywide. And so the big part of that is it's actually going to not just be countywide, it's going to migrate into other counties adjacent to us because they're going to be using the same tool as well. So I don't know that, I won't say I won't know that, but Google may have a very useful tool. I'm not sure how that it ties into what Zone Haven's doing, if at all, but I will just, state that a separate effort wouldn't hurt because you're getting maybe the benefit of some students who are able to commit time and energy towards studying specific areas versus the countywide effort that's underway currently.
Okay.
Can I piggyback on that, Steve?
Go ahead.
I thought I heard an article or a story on NPR that Marin or somebody developed for Marin County an algorithm that predicts where a wildfire will occur, which homes are most at risk based on topography, wind patterns, etc. You know anything about that, Chief?
I haven't seen or heard anything about that. I know that some jurisdictions are using historical data in their community to try to determine when the next incident may occur. And they're using some of what you just described to provide some modeling and some guesstimating on what could be next, maybe using some form of artificial intelligence as well to do some sort of predictive analysis. And so I haven't seen it actually in use except through a demonstration at a vendor show. That's the only time I've actually seen the tool.
Okay.
Thank you.
Chief, do you think we could invite Quinn Gardner to the next meeting or maybe the one after and talk about evacuation, wildfire mitigation, preparation and such? I've sort of lost touch with the work she's doing. She's so knowledgeable and was so involved in it.
Yeah, I think I can certainly reach out to Quinn and see if she can carve out some time. Quinn's got her hands in a lot of things right now, especially MWP related activities. She's starting to migrate slowly but surely back into emergency operation planning. She was on the countywide call earlier this afternoon as an example. So So yeah, for an update, I certainly will, mention to her whether it makes sense this month or next month after Zone Haven's completed their work.
Yeah.
I'm not sure, but I'll certainly check with her and see which one she thinks might be ideal.
Great. And I'm just thinking 20, 30 minutes. It wouldn't be a super involved, long presentation, but that would be very helpful.
Absolutely.
I'd find it terrific.
And I think Quinn is also doing some public webinars and trainings. I know I went to a couple that she did last year, found them very helpful. So I'll keep an eye out also if I see a schedule. I think sometimes it's in Hotshot and some of the other communications that we do, but those are really valuable and really appreciate everything she does.
Yeah, the
She's
goal was to
amazing.
try to do more in person this year than we had been given the pandemic last year where everything was more virtual and a resumption of something similar to what we've known before.
Great.
Yeah, the virtual format actually, I think, works really well because it eliminates the barrier of entry. When somebody doesn't have to physically drive to get to a location, you probably get more people attending. And
Certainly a
then you can
convenience
record
thing.
it.
I agree.
Yeah,
Yes.
And Dave, would you send me an email with a link to that article in the IJ?
sure.
I'm surprised I missed it, but I would appreciate that. That would be great. Thank you.
Yeah, that sounds great. And I think, for the most part, it sounds like the work that Zone Haven's doing is already so far advanced on this. And if anything, this could be another data point for them.
Yeah.
But it sounds like they've already got a lot.
Excellent.
Okay, good. And then the only other thing was, again, I saw this in the news just in the past week or so, but it was great to see the governor's designation of drought by counties, but it wasn't so great to see that Marin unfortunately didn't get that designation. So, and it sounded, I didn't get into too much of the details, but it sounded like maybe it was just an application issue. So hopefully
Yeah.
we do get that in there
I
and
didn't
can
fu- I
qualify.
didn't fully
for-
understand the explanation for why it wasn't a drought county. It certainly seems to me like it makes sense that it is, but
I thought I read somewhere that there was a claim from the state officials that we didn't apply for some form of emergency action or declaration.
Right.
So that might have prevented them from actually including us with the other counties.
Yeah, yeah.
okay, great.
Okay.
Okay, so I do have a topic I want to talk about, and that has to do with cancer screening in firefighters. So Jason Hatfield got this article about a dog screening program for cancer. Has anybody heard about dog screening for cancer program? Stan, you've heard about it? Have you tried it?
Nope.
Not personally. Okay. So the thinking behind it is that, and the chief brought this to the Fire Foundation thinking, is this something the Fire Foundation might want to fund as an addition to what the firefighters go through? So it turns out that the risk of cancer in firefighters is very high. It's probably the #1 cause of death in firefighters. Heart disease second, accidents either on the road or during work or third, and there's other causes, but cancer is very high, and for a variety of reasons. The flammable material that goes up in houses and wildfires often has carcinogens and toxins and such, so it's a big deal. Now, the program that came up is this program where dogs will sniff and looking for cancer. Now you'd say, really, dogs sniffing for cancer? Well, the science behind this is on the volatile organic compounds. You know that dogs sniff for bodies, cadaver dogs. You know that dogs sniff for drugs at airports and things. You know that dogs sniff for agricultural products at airports. And they're actually dogs now sniffing for COVID. University of Pennsylvania is doing a study on it. So the smell of a dog is 10,000 to 100,000 times a human being. So they have exquisitely sensitive noses. And the analogy I heard was that if a human being can smell a teaspoon of sugar in a teacup, a dog can smell a teaspoon of sugar in 2 Olympic swimming pools. I mean, they really have phenomenal smelling capabilities. So assuming that these dogs are well trained to smell for something specific, this program of smelling for cancer is up and running. And it's not super expensive. It's about $35 per test. And what you do is, and what's interesting is that Southern Marin has done the program already, Southern Marin Fire. And they have 50 people that participated. And what they did was they put on a mask and breathed into it for about a minute or 90 seconds, and then took it and sealed it up in a jar, and then sent it to this company to be analyzed by dogs taking it out of the jar. And they have three cancer sniffing dogs. And if 2 of the 3 alert, that's considered a positive. So in this case, what Southern Marin's experience was that they had 12 positives out of 50, which is a lot. That's a lot. Now there are false positives and they knew that went in, but they told people not to smoke before doing the test, make sure their teeth aren't all inflamed because gingivitis can give you a false positive, and there's other reasons. But it turned out there were 12 positives. And I talked to a battalion chief there. His name is Jason Goldman, and he's a battalion chief that oversaw this program. So out of the 12 positive, what they then do is they refer each individual firefighter to their personal physician for evaluation. Now, they ran into some problems in that different physicians had different sense of what a full evaluation would be. Some physicians were on board with CAT scan, MRI, blood test, x-rays, et cetera. And some physicians said, well, I really don't want a dog telling me that I should do an evaluation on you for cancer, that they weren't buying into the whole theory of volatile organic compounds in dogs sniffing it. So that became a bit of an issue, but eventually the 12 people got evaluated, and it turned out that one person had cancer, one of the 12. And without giving any personal information, this person had a colon cancer that required surgery, radiation, and chemo, and now they're cured, which is great. In retrospect, that person had been having some symptoms and denying an issue, but was motivated to get the evaluation by the testing. So they feel basically that finding that one person and saving that life, which apparently they have done, was justification enough for the whole program, which is great. Although they felt that having so many positive created a lot of ripple effects that were more difficult. Doing the evaluation, making people concerned, then having to reassure people after testing that there's no problem, and the whole idea of how you put that to rest. So what they then changed, they said they're not going to do the dogs anymore. They're going to go to blood testing. So there's a company that does blood testing, like for PSA, CEA, CA119. There's all these markers of cancer, and there's a lot of way to slice it. But the bottom line is this: cancer is a serious issue for firefighters because it's a high risk area. And I think it would warrant doing something more universal for the department, but I'm not sure what it is at this point. I'm a little confused as to what the best road forward is. So what I'd like the chief to do is maybe allow me to talk to the EMS director when they're finally appointed for the department, and then talk about with the nurse in the department about what's the best way to approach cancer screening in the entire department based on age and risk and symptoms and anything else. And what can we do to try to enhance the possibility of finding cancer early rather than late in firefighters? So that's what I'm going to recommend to the chief. We haven't had a private conversation about it yet. But anyway, it's a very interesting topic. And I'm glad that we could talk about dogs sniffing cancer, because to me, it sounds like science fiction, but it's actually happening to some extent.
If you want some more information about it, Pine Street Clinic in San Anselmo does early stage training of the dogs by exposing them to various scents and then ultimately testing them to see how well they've developed it. I know that only because I had a neighbor take her dog there. Her dog failed and is not credible in the sniffing program, but that's where I heard about it. And it's even in our own backyard in San Anselmo.
Excellent. I will look that up.
Okay.
Yeah, Steve, thanks so much for bringing this up. It really strikes a very personal note with me, especially right now. I have a friend who is a firefighter in San Francisco, and he was just diagnosed a couple of months ago with, after having seizures, with cancer. It's a frontal lobe cancer. Ooh. And early detection is just so key to get it before it spreads. And unfortunately, Matt didn't have that luxury. It's pretty advanced, and it's pretty rough for all of us.
It's a cautionary tale.
Yeah.
Well, thank you, Dr. Mizrak. I appreciate that research, and I appreciate your willingness to engage with the new EMS director. And for those of you who aren't aware, Dr. Mizrak generously gave of his time once again this past Monday to help us out with our interview process for the new EMS director. So we had the benefit of his expertise and perspective in that process, and it was very helpful to us. So as soon as the individual is onboarded, that's one of the first conversations I'd like to have with them on how you two can partner and come up with some solutions that are really helpful and meaningful, whether it be the canine detection program or something bloodborne related or elsewhere. I just lost a friend last month who had stage 4 chest cancer, and one of the nicest firefighters and persons you would ever know. And it started where he really didn't even realize he had a problem until he felt faint one day. End up succumbing to a major stroke as opposed to the cancer. Just a few months after we all met with him to kind of, you know, I won't say our last goodbyes, but it turns out that's what most of us were doing. So it is important. It is something that's claiming far too many of us a lot earlier than, you know, we've seen happen in the past. And given that, it's certainly the kind of thing where I've done studies on ultrafine particles and what they're doing to our bodies. And we didn't realize that over the years as firefighters, we didn't protect ourselves. We didn't understand what we couldn't see and the dangers. And we knew, you know, going into smoke-filled atmospheres was dangerous, but we didn't know about the overhaul environment and how, you know, what you don't see is really what's grabbing you in most cases. You know, it's not during the fire, it's post-fire. That is your unseen danger. And so as a result, you know, we try to encourage our members to use full PPE, to rotate gear and do other things that'll reduce the amount of potential absorption into the skin or the inhalation hazard and those things. But those are just steps we're taking more recently over the last 5-10 years. So there's a lot more to be done, but we're taking those steps, and the newer generation of firefighters, I think, is not, how should we say, inhibited by the older generation who is less apt to want to take some of those protective measures. I mean, I can remember when I first joined the fire department, after a fire at night, you see all these little flickering lights, you know, while people are doing overhaul. That's the fire after the fire, people smoking. You know, these were true lung giants, if you will. How did you fight the fire without an SCBA and then go right in behind that and smoke cigarettes? But that was the reality, and that's what we're transitioning away from over the years. And, you know, some of those individuals were afflicted with cancer later on and some weren't. So moving on to a new topic, I just wanted to say thank you for that. It's really something we're trying to change in the way we view protecting ourselves, and any help we can get for detection is certainly going to be helpful because, as you stated, detecting early makes the difference.
Beautiful. Chief, you're up for your report.
Oh, it's my turn.
Is anything going on?
All right, so we're going to start with Marin Wildfire Prevention Authority. Back on April 19th, Executive Director Mark Brown presented to the San Rafael City Council, and he basically shared some updates about new staff such as Ann Krelock, who became the Program and Planning Manager for the MWPA. She's onboarded now. We also have the benefit of a MWPA legal counsel, a lady named Sabrina Teller, who's hit the ground running. You know, and you have to hit the ground running right now because there's some real tight timelines on submitting our project proposals and making sure these things get to the board pretty quickly so that we're able to launch a lot of these projects that have been assembled throughout the county. And I got to give a special shout out to Quinn and Kate and Gavin, Chief Gray, a lot of other staff who've all come together to look at our project submissions and determine what really makes sense for what we're trying to accomplish and help prioritize the effort when it came to bringing on new staff, which I'll speak about shortly. When it comes to identifying what needs to be done and where as a priority move towards expending local defensible space and now core allocation funding. And so it's just a lot of work that's gone into this in a relatively short period of time. Some of this is initial work to get us launched, and then work coming forward next year and the year after will be just maintenance work as opposed to the initial launch that some of this effort is right now. But that being said, Fire Safe Marin actually provided their first workshop last week, and they had secured one of two chipper contracts. And From what I understand, they probably are on the verge of getting the second done if it hasn't already been done. And the first chipper days are going to be next Monday. So that effort is coming right behind the inspection efforts that have already started in April. Let me backtrack just a little bit and go over to the vegetation management side of things. If you recall, the Fire Safe Marin effort to provide chipper days was going to closely piggyback right behind those inspections in neighborhoods, so that once those inspections were done, the residents being educated about the changes and the compliance needs, removing their fuel and vegetation would have the benefit of the chipper coming somewhere within a week or so or two at the most from having done their inspection and getting their fuel out there and getting it chipped and removed. And so with that, we had 6 inspectors last year, and that number kind of dwindled down to roughly 3 by the end of the season. This year, I'm happy to say right now we have 9 defensible space seasonal inspectors and 5 other vegetation management specialists. We have the benefit of Chief Gray, who's come back to provide us with supplemental assistance with those new staff, along with the other responsibilities that we have. We've got 3 more defensible space inspectors who are going to be hired effective June 1st in the middle of June. So we're going to have roughly 12 temporary defensible space seasonal inspectors and 5 vegetation management specialists, 17 people out in San Rafael and Marinwood, covering the 9,000 parcels that we've never been able to cover all in its totality. And the goal is to try to cover them all during this next several month period. And so that's a huge monumental effort, and it's thanks to your support and those other individuals within the county who voted for Measure C that enable us now to really get out and achieve the goal of fire safety in every possible home that we can, and every private parcel that we can, for that matter. So that's phenomenal, and I'm really hoping by the end of the season I can report 100% inspection of all parcels based on the numbers we have right now, if those numbers continue. Unfortunately, we did lose one individual just about a week and a half ago because that individual was not really a good fit for the culture and the expectations we have of the staff that work together as a team here. So with that,
Chief, can I ask you a question?
absolutely.
They have the title of inspector, so that sounds official, and that's great. And they have uniforms and they look official.
Yes.
How proactive versus collaborative are they when they go out and make an evaluation? Do they tell people it would be a good idea if you did this, that, and the other? We could help you, you do this. Or are they being a little stronger than that and saying, you really need to remove this tree, you really need to do this, that, and the other? How aggressive or collaborative are they being in general, if you can do that oversimplification?
Well, here's the thing. I can tell you what happened last year. I just spoke with Quinn about this past week, and also with Mary, one of the vegetation management specialists, indicating that I wanted to go out and observe some of the inspections that were taking place. What we feel is the most appropriate way is to actually outline and educate the homeowner about what's needed and why. We're looking at the house out approach. We explain what that means. We explain why a certain species probably needs to be removed, or definitely should be removed, based on the ordinance now that's been enacted, combined with what we know historically to be problems for homes and or neighborhoods who have certain dynamics. And so the goal is to educate first. Compliance through enforcement is generally the last tool that we want to impose on individuals here. So the goal is to be partners in how to make the home safe, how to ensure that your neighbors are actually being very proactive as a Firewise community, as an example. And so the goal is to get everybody to really see the value and get on board. Now, there's always some holdouts, and that's the unfortunate reality. In fact, I just saw an email about an individual in Marinwood who said, I usually go the opposite direction. When someone in government tells me what to do, I dig in and I do the opposite. Well, that's really an unfortunate approach that he's taking, but there's tools that we have at our disposal to ensure or gain compliance. But our goal is to use that only as a last resort. I've come from a place where we tried to do enforcement through citations. That became problematic because you need an appeals process in place. it really, it can be very time consuming, and it doesn't engender the change that we're really looking for. So I think that's the last resort, but it's certainly something that, you know, if we need to lean into it, I'm willing to, and if it needs to come up to my level to do so, I'm certainly willing to do so. But I think our goal is initially just try to make sure that we're partnering with the public.
Okay, that sounds like a great approach. Thank you.
You're welcome. I'm almost 100% convinced that's the approach they were taught by Quinn, by Chief Gray, by the other staff who were here last year, because that's how they were brought to understand, you know, this approach is the better approach than trying to come with the heavy hand, if you will.
Yeah. Because we had the meetings with the public before COVID, we had a number of meetings talking about the plan for San Rafael. This is before the entire county. One of the pushbacks was, I don't really want to be told what to do, and I don't want you to put a lien on my house because I'm not doing it, and I don't want you to force me to do it. You know, all this heavy-handed stuff was what people feared. And what Chris Gray said at the time was, you know, that's not our point. We're not trying to be heavy-handed.
Right.
We want to lead you in the right direction. We want to work with you, do it collaboratively. And that was the spirit of what we talked about. So it sounds like you've embodied that.
No, absolutely. And I will say, though, that there is language, for instance, in our most recent mailing, if you guys recall seeing this, I don't know if you remember seeing or receiving this, but
Yes.
basically it speaks to, at the very back, compliance, it's the law. And what it does is it does explain that, you know, not only are we here to partner with you, but it also tells you consequence and understanding that this is, you know, regulation and it's law that's backing this. It isn't just a wish, it's a requirement. And so it speaks to having year-round responsibility. And it also speaks to, if you're not in compliance at the time of initial assessment, you will be issued a notice of violation and a timeline for reassessment. But it's the last statement is, we encourage residents to take advantage of the various resources available to help you comply and avoid any enforcement action. So that's the disclaimer. You know, we're still trying to appease to your you know, somehow to your goodwill or somehow to your cooperation to gain compliance. We don't really want to be the heavy hand unless we absolutely have to. And I got a feeling there'll probably be a couple of instances where we'll have to, but that, again, issuing citations, it goes in a different place depending on, you know, whether or not you've met all the criteria and you have everything in place to be able to deal with an appeal, as an example. Someone may have a really compelling argument they want to make and, you know, says, well, I want to go before so-and-so and plead my case. Well, if you don't have something in place, then now you got there's a successful challenge right there, that you don't even have something in place to help me, you know, achieve an exemption.
Okay.
Any
Well,
kickback
Tom can
from-
help you with that if you need a process.
Yeah, I can
I'm
help with
kidding.
that.
No,
do that
I
all
think
the
we ought
time
to
for
be
tribes.
avoid being heavy-handed.
Has there been any,
Yeah.
has there been any kickback from the lawsuit down in Mill Valley? In terms of people going, well,
Not just yet. Today, as an example, though, we did get one individual who decided to go straight to a council member with their concerns. And ironically, the notice they were issued was from last season, and they're just now deciding to do and take some action about an Italian cypress, few of the Italian cypress trees that his father must have planted when he was younger, and he's got a sentimental attachment to them for that reason. And I'm certainly a nostalgic, sentimental kind of person, but that doesn't, I think, really qualify as a criteria we can evaluate for making an exemption. But I think he's trying to make the argument that this is not really a dangerous species of vegetation. And, you know, we've got evidence that probably said otherwise. And so, and if you look at it on our current flyer, which it wasn't on last year's mailing, our current flyer does have Italian cypress listed down here as one of the species. So that being said, you know, we'll do what we can to assess the situation and come to some resolve, hopefully one way or another, to help this individual gain compliance. And then, of course, he noted the expense of trying to remove those trees, a couple $1,000s each perhaps, and that's nothing to frown or shy away from, or shall I say, nothing to sneeze at. You know, that's a substantial cost if you have 4 or 5 of these trees. So, but we have a potential grant program that we're looking to put out forward as well, and that was going to be part of the report that, as we move forward with core allocation funding, we're looking at upwards of $500 to $1,000 per household that may be available to individuals who request assistance and can qualify for a grant.
Right.
All right, so drought. CAL FIRE hadn't really communicated anything about how they intend to approach fighting fire this year based on drought conditions. My hope is that their goal is to actually front load with as much as they can early on when an incident starts, so that they can drop massive amounts of fire retardant and water on a fire, get ground crews in as quickly as they can to contain the incident. I don't know that that's an approach they're going to go with, but I think in the long run, when you front load that way, you have a better chance of maybe stopping forward progress of an incident instead of just letting it burn for thousands and thousands of acres, which takes away fuel, but now requires a lot of use of water and other materials in a drought type scenario. So I'm hoping their water conservation plan is really to use more on the front end instead of using a lot of water for an extended period. I'm just not sure what their plan is though. So that being said, they do have fire retardant aircraft. And hopefully you'll see a lot more of that being utilized instead of a lot of the helicopters that are going to pick up water and, drop, buckets over and over again. Not to say that's not useful. That is very useful, a useful way of approaching it. But what we're doing here currently, we just had an engineer's exam as an example in Novato, and we were able to put the recapturing unit in place. And I believe it may be, yes, it's in our report. That water was recycled and we weren't wasting water, which was great. Even though we're in a remote area at Novato Station 62, they did an excellent job of making sure that the water just basically recirculated back through the pump and back through the system. And there was not a lot of water runoff or waste. And so that was an excellent thing. And I hope other agencies are utilizing and see the value in this, and we'll certainly make it available to others so that they can reduce what the public might suddenly get irritated or find to be what they think is fire department waste. We don't want to see that happen. So I was really thrilled. That was the first time I saw the unit in operation. I went up twice to see on 2 different days the process and what we were doing with our engineer exam. And I was also pleasantly surprised to see that we had a pump and roll evolution, which I'm familiar with pump and roll primarily from the airport. But for those of you who know, we also have type 3 apparatus that do pump and roll in a wildland environment, but it's usually with a hand line as opposed to a turret. But our engineers, part of their process and examination process is knowing how to operate that type 3, which is huge. And so just really speaks volumes about how our members are prepared when they get in the seat as an engineer. So that was very encouraging to see. Let's see. Let's skip over to COVID. Today I read something, and I won't go all the way through this entire report, but today I read something that Governor Newsom is looking at a no mask mandate, or excuse me, no longer having a mask mandate starting in June 15th. And they have pushed the date out potentially to August 1st, but they're believing that when he opens everything up on June 15th, that'll also be when he starts to relax on the mask requirements for employees indoors, as long as they're around other individuals who've been masked, who are vaccinated, and outdoors, unless it's a mass gathering event, he's not going to require, individuals who've been vaccinated to actually wear a mask outdoors as well. So that's a huge shift in, and I'm just curious about how that's going to work out. I know we're approaching maybe 60% of the adults in the state being fully vaccinated here probably within the next week or two. The stats I saw showed about 47% of Californians 16 and older have been fully vaccinated, with another 16% or so who only had their first dose. So, you get into a point where 2/3 of, or close to 2/3 of the state will be fully vaccinated here probably by the end of this month. just really curious about that last third, and, you know, with the variants and all those other things, how that's gonna factor into everyone's safety. So, but, apparently there's an assuredness or a confidence that, you know, the worst is behind us, is what I'm gathering from their decisions and their actions. And I don't know if that's aligning right now with CDC, or if that's something that Governor Newsom has, you know, only spoke with state staff to kind of arrive at that conclusion. I'm not really entirely sure about that, but I know that we weren't able to go to the yellow tier like we had thought we were, because there was a slight increase in infections. And so that shows that things are still vacillating. It doesn't show a constant improvement like I would have expected. And hopefully it's not going to be regression. But that being said, Marin County started to phase out the large scale vaccinations. And I believe it was just as of a week ago Saturday, they had issued their first dose vaccinations to individuals. They're going to remain open until the end of the month for anyone that needs the second dose. But then I read something afterwards that stated that for anyone that's age 12 to 15, they're going to remain open now and start administering those vaccinations, so that within perhaps a month's time, if not sooner, roughly 14,000 kids in Marin County will be eligible and able to receive full vaccination. And so that's huge, because that means now by the start of the school year, all the kids should be vaccinated that whose parents allow them to be vaccinated, and everyone, including staff at the schools, the teachers, the coaches, everyone will now go into the schools in a safe environment. And so looking forward to seeing that become the reality. I wish it was the reality where I live right now. Unfortunately, that's not quite the case yet, but it also made me wonder how it was that larger cities like San Francisco were able to move to the yellow tier, and how is it that they've done better than we have? And I question that, but somehow or another it's happened. And so I hear San Mateo County, the same thing. They were able to move to the yellow tier, and we'll see. So Contra Costa County and a few other counties have not quite, been able to move to that just yet, and may not be moving to it. They may just rely on the governor reopening before they even get closer to the yellow tier, from what I understand. So there could be an announcement for us, again, in the next couple of weeks, depending on how things progress. The Larkspur Ferry Terminal will continue to operate, but they're going to require individuals have an appointment to be able to receive a vaccination there. So there also is a migration towards mobile pop-up vaccination sites, where they're going to look to those areas of the community where they feel individuals have not had access to, or for whatever reason have not been able to secure appointments, or maybe interested in just finally deciding to take the vaccination. They're going to be at some of these locations with mobile pop-up vaccination facilities, if you will. So I'm gonna move on to a report that I received that I was trying to read the report, and it was a little confusing by the way it was structured. But the short of it is, our members are doing an excellent job when there's a witness cardiac event, and coming in and using the automated external defibrillators and making patients viable who may not have been viable without intervention. And so, I have to say hats off to the men and women of the San Rafael Fire Department for being as good as they are at pre-hospital medicine. They're phenomenal. That's what I can just say. Just the report and the study that I saw shows that their success rate is actually impressive. And so I'm not sure, again, how to read it exactly. I know Dr. Mizrock and others may be able to look at that and kind of look through and see where the question marks, and be able to answer some of those questions, or some of the anomalies in there, and figure out, what's factoring into this. Is it, witness versus unwitness? Is it, age? Is it, passing at the hospital versus passing in the field? Those things are all part of the study, if you will. But just again, maintaining life before they get to the hospital, that's huge.
That's great.
Whether
I'd
they
love to
later
see that
succumb or
study.
not. I'm sorry.
If you can send the study by email, I'd love to see it.
Absolutely.
Who did the study?
was Utstein, and I'm not recalling exactly if there was a specific name attached to it, but
Okay,
I just, you know what, I just filed it. That's what I did. I got it
When-
under
when
my
you get a
data
chance.
section. Hang on, I'll tell you, just give me a moment. I'll be able to tell you. So while I'm talking or while I'm looking for it, I'm going to explain also that a week ago Saturday, Mr. John Diego, who's a retired captain from the San Rafael Fire Department, celebrated his 100th birthday. Someone told me originally that he was a former fire chief. So I asked him what years he served as fire chief, and his son explained to me that he was actually a captain and that he turned down the chief's job.
Oh,
Like, whoa, okay, that's why you live to be 100, obviously.
that's right.
So, but that being said, it was a great day. Roughly, I'm gonna guesstimate about 50 vehicles or more proceeded past Mr. Diego, and I had my kids. I pulled over and said, "Hey, you guys sit tight." Brought one of my daughters out so she could take a picture of me with Mr. Diego, and people were walking by and just coming up and greeting him from afar, staying socially distant, and he looked fit. He looked good. You wouldn't have thought he was 100 years old at all, and it was just great. So that being said, that celebration, and we already discussed earlier the buckets from Dr. Mizrock, so no need to cover that again. And then I think I had one. Oh, I know what I want to speak to. I don't want to end on a sad note with the report, but this past Saturday we lost Joe Vasco, who was separated from service just under 2 months ago. One of the individuals in the department was stopping by his home to take some of his belongings to him. He found the door slightly ajar, knocked on it, called out, no one answered, and being that he was friends with Joe, he stepped inside the home to see what was going on and found Joe there deceased. And the guess is maybe he had been dead for at least a day or so. So that being said, you can imagine the myriad of mixed emotions that folks feel regarding Joe's loss and untimely death. And so Saturday night, we did a remembrance at Station 52 for a couple of hours where Reverend Jan Joel Fay, who's a retired San Rafael Police Department member, also heavily involved in critical incident stress debriefing and other peer support measures. A lady named Heidi Carmen, she brought a support dog there, and a couple of members from the local 1775 peer support team, critical incident. Well, I'll call them the North Bay Incident Management Team, stress debriefing team members. They showed up as well, and we just sat and kind of talked. And I listened. I opened and shared a few things, and then the rest of the group spoke. And then basically, everyone recalled something positive about Joe. And there was a lot of laughter because, a lot of what was said was tied into how Joe was. And some people, I was shocked, knew him going back 30 some odd years when they were in high school together. But that being said, we had two more sessions. One was Monday at 4:00, and the other one was yesterday at 4:00. And that covered all three shifts. Everyone had an opportunity to kind of do a remembrance and talk about how things affect you in the fire service, not just this situation with Joe, but just things in general, because it's a good time to have that. In fact, this is Behavioral Health Month, if you will, for fire service members, and next week will be Behavioral Health Week, specifically for members in the fire service and in law, public safety in general. And so all that to say, we're looking at what we can do that's appropriate to celebrate Joe's life with Local 1775. I don't think we can treat this as a line of duty death. He's been separated for several weeks, but at the same time, there is something I think we can do as an organization to support the family right now. It looks like 1775 is kind of taking the lead on it. I have one of the battalion chiefs being a liaison to the family and to 1775. And Captain Anthony Alviso and I will at some point sit and have a conversation about what the department does to show support during the services and or before then up to and leading to the services. So yeah, really unfortunate situation, and it's something that, you know, the members are going to be probably impacted by for some time. So that being said, we had a fire, as we talked about earlier, over in the canalways, and that we thought was roughly 5 or 6 acres. Turns out it was probably closer to 12 by the time it was fully contained. And I saw a couple of impressive owls that night flapping their wings. It reminded me of a skate in the ocean where you can see the underside of it and it's white. This thing's wings were just huge. And I thought, what is that? I didn't get to see the head. All I could see was the wings. And it was Matt Windrum that told me, hey, I think it's an owl. Like, wow, okay. Nice going. It's out there in the marsh, tucked away. You wouldn't have known it until nighttime is when the owls come out, apparently, right? So that being said, I saw something strange happen. I'm gonna just share with the group. On Saturday, I was at the Berkeley Marina walking, and I glanced up and I see a pelican flying by with a squirrel clutching a squirrel. And I'm like, what? Are you kidding me? And I'm thinking, what's he gonna do? He's not gonna be able to chew this thing. So what is he doing? Well, he was heading over to where some of the boats were docked, and I'm pretty sure he was going to land in the water and probably try to drown this squirrel before ingesting it, because there's no other reason to clutch this thing and fly away with it. I never ever thought a pelican ate anything other than fish. Go figure.
I could use that pelican. I got a very pesky squirrel in the backyard that eats all the suet meant for the woodpeckers. And it drives me crazy.
Wow.
Well, I want to say we're going to miss Joe. He was a really good guy. Is there anything the fire commission could do? Is there a family involved that we could be supportive to, or I don't know his personal circumstances.
From what I understand, he had reconnected with his girlfriend recently, but his mom lived just a couple of doors down. So the firefighter that found him went and told the mom what was going on. And so Miss Vasco is the only person I know of. I'm not sure. I think he lost his father a couple of years ago. So I'm assuming and he didn't have any children. So I'm assuming it's the girlfriend and the mom right now is the primary folks that are really receiving the support from the members. But
Okay.
if we come up with some ideas that we think you can help with, I'll certainly circle back around to you.
Yeah, great.
Thank
I
you.
appreciate that.
Yep.
Super.
So I got I don't know if you say Utstein or Utstein survival report, and it's something from My Cares, powered by Stryker, but I don't see a name attached to it. This is a report that BC Matt Windrum generated.
Oh,
So I'm gonna do a little more follow-up with him to find out, but I'll scan and send these to you.
thank you very much, Chief. Appreciate it.
Absolutely.
Great report. Okay, we're towards the end of the meeting. Does anybody have anything they just thought of or want to add, or?
Do we want to start giving thought to having in-person meetings again? I assume
I
all
think
of
we
us are
do.
vaccinated.
Yeah, I think we do want to think about that. My understanding is with this Zoom meeting, it goes through September, but it doesn't go
Okay.
beyond that. So I'm assuming that the city is not going to be supporting meetings after September, all else being equal. But if we wanted to, say, meet in July or August, if the commission wants to do that, I'm comfortable with it. I'm feeling very confident now. Maybe it's false confidence, but being fully vaccinated and knowing the ambient COVID in the county is very low to start with. I mean, those two things together give me a lot of comfort. Doesn't mean it couldn't change, but at this point, I'm very confident.
Maybe we
agree,
see where
and
we're at
also-
the next meeting.
Yeah.
Sorry, Dave.
So
Yeah, I
Zoom-
would agree. And I know the chief mentioned that the governor is going to be issuing the changes in terms of mask rules. So yeah, I think it sounds very reasonable. Start in July.
Okay. Stan, are you okay with that?
Absolutely. Love to have it happen.
Okay. Nadine, you okay with that? Okay, great.
And where, do we know where we'd like to meet?
Well, I'd like to meet in the PSC if
There
possible.
you go.
Yeah.
That'll be it.
There's a couple nice rooms there. One's very big and one's nice and big.
Yeah.
Right.
So you want to aim, say June Zoom and then July for a live meeting?
That
Is that the
works.
plan?
Sure.
Okay, let's plan it that way. That sounds great.
Right.
Okay, everybody, stay safe. And thanks for joining us. And we'll Zoom next month. And then in July, we'll be together. That'll be wonderful.
Indeed.
Sounds
I'll
good.
provide the Johnny's Donuts. Bye-bye, guys.
Good to see
Thank
you.
you.
all.
Thank you, everybody.
Bye.
Good to see you.
Yeah, bye-bye.
Bye-bye.